Let's move forward here, and we want to talk about an issue that has been a little bit in the news, and I think it's an important issue, especially of what's happening in the U.S. and the U.K., quite frankly, and also in France, is the long history between the Black liberation movement across the African diaspora, but especially here in the United States, with the Palestinian movement for liberation from occupation and apartheid. And we are very, very happy to be joined for this conversation by a good friend, Sean Blackmon, who is an organizer with the Answer Coalition. Sean, thank you so much for being with us.
Eugene, Rania, it's a pleasure to be with you all.
Well, it is always a pleasure to have you here with us, Sean. I mean, this is, I'm sure you've seen a topic that's been much discussed. You're someone who's worked in solidarity with Palestine for some time. But I mean, give us some insight from your perspective about why it does seem that there's a very tight relationship here between those in the United States looking for, more liberatory policies towards the Black population and those looking for the same vis-a-vis the Palestinians.
Absolutely. And I mean, this question of Black Palestinian solidarity is particularly significant when we remember that the Black liberation struggle in the United States for a very long time has been looked upon by different social movements and liberation struggles around the world as a primary struggle amongst the oppressed people in the world, precisely because of our experience of enslavement, discrimination, and oppression here in the beating heart of world imperialism. And so when we talk about the history of Black Americans with Palestine, we can go as far back as 1964 with Malcolm X. He wrote an article in the Egypt Gazette entitled Zionist Logic. And Malcolm laid out, I mean, just a lot of very important points. I mean, number one, he highlighted the fact that Israel had a particular role in serving as an outpost for U.S. imperial interests in the Middle East. And he also said that, Israel was a force that was meant to divide the Arab, the Asian, and the African. And of course, he was saying this at a time when national liberation struggles were happening all across what was then called the Third World, what today we may call the Global South. Malcolm X also visited the leadership of the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, the first Black American leader to meet with Palestinian leaders, but not the last. We can also talk about the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense, of course, a revolutionary internationalist organization, and its co-founder, Huey Newton, wrote a article called On the Middle East, and he said, "We stand with the Palestinians' just cause 100%. And Black Panther leadership also met with the PLO in Algiers, walking in the footsteps of Malcolm X. Jesse Jackson in the late 70s met with the PLO, demanded that decades later, ain't nothing changed but the weather. I mean, it's the same old tropes getting rolled out over and over again. And, Muhammad Ali, he marched for Palestine, visited a Palestinian refugee camp in Lebanon. James Baldwin, in 1972, he wrote an essay entitled, oh wow, the name just the title escapes me. But he was talking about how he left the United States, or wanted to leave the U.S., but he refused to go to Israel, and he asked the question, which side of Jerusalem would I live on? And we can take this even to the cultural realm. I mean, Peter Tosh, in his classic song "Equal Rights," he names all these Black countries, Angola, Botswana, Rhodesia, Jamaica, fighting for equal rights. He also said Palestine, fighting for equal rights. Right into the realm of hip hop. Back in 2015, Lauryn Hill canceled a concert in Tel Aviv because she was not able to also perform in the Palestinian territories. Tef Poe, Immortal Technique, M1 of Dead Prez, Most Def, Talib Kweli. I mean, there's just so many examples of Black Americans standing in solidarity with Palestine at different levels. And we have to ask ourselves why. And to answer that question, we can come right down to the era of the movement for Black Lives. I mean, we know that the seeds were planted for the movement in 2012 after the racist vigilante killing of Trayvon Martin down in Florida, my home state. And around that time, Palestinians were posting photos of themselves holding signs saying, "We know what it's like to have your loved ones killed and have there be no justice." A couple of years later, Mike Brown killed by Officer Darren Wilson in Ferguson, Missouri. Nationwide rebellion against racist police terror. And it was Palestinians that were advising protesters in the United States on protest tactics, telling us how to mitigate the impacts of tear gas. And it was discovered that the tear gas and other weapons that were being used against Palestinians in Palestine were being used against us here in the US. Also, it was discovered that there were these what they call deadly exchange programs going on, where U.S. police departments were going to Israel to be trained, literally going to learn the same suppression tactics that are carried out by the racist apartheid state of Israel, and taking them and bringing it over here to commit acts of racist police terror. And so even to 2020, and actually, you know, Eugene, you lived in D.C. for some time, so I know you remember former police chief Kathy Lanier.
Yes.
And she once said that no experience in her life had a bigger impact on her job than the time spent in Israel. And she oversaw a number of police killings that, of course, were completely supported by Mayor Muriel Bowser and the local government. But even right up into the George Floyd era, we saw murals of George Floyd on walls in Palestine. This idea of "I can't breathe" being connected to the suffocating reality living under the Jim Crow state of Israel. And, you know, we have security companies like G4S that were profiting off the incarceration of Black folks here in the US and Palestinians in Palestine. So the point that I always try to drive home to people is that the connection between the Black liberation struggle and the Palestinian liberation struggle is both material and moral. The same racist, capitalist, imperialist system that props up and supports Israel in its genocidal project against the Palestinians is precisely the same system that oppressed and enslaved and continues to oppress Black folks right here in the US. We have to understand how oppression at home is connected to war and imperialism abroad. And that helps us remember that we are not alone in our struggle against white supremacy and settler colonialism, and that since the character of our oppression is international, then the means through which we free ourselves of that oppression must be international as well.
Very well put, Sean. And, you know, I think it's really important you kind of went through the timeline of all that and brought it back to the predictions, like all we can do is speculate. But how might this play out in a Democratic Party that's so dependent on the Black vote?
Yeah, and real quick, I just remembered that James Baldwin essay I was talking about earlier is called "Take Me to the Water" for anyone that wants to look it up. But this is an important question that you raised, Rania, and you know, Joe Biden, he can't win for losing, man. I mean, his numbers amongst Arab Americans have just tanked. It's tanked. His numbers amongst young Black people specifically are tanking as well along this same issue. And we have to remember that students are being viciously attacked right now for standing in support of Palestine. Groups like Students for Justice in Palestine. We saw the Senate resolution pass, basically condemning these protests as being pro-Hamas or whatever. Joe Biden seemingly moving in a similar direction as well. And so, really, at just about every level throughout Joe Biden's presidency, he's been shooting himself in the foot by simply not delivering on things that would have improved his standing amongst the poorest and working elements of the United States, namely Black people, who we all know for a fact is a group that is crucial to the victory of the Democrat Party in an electoral stance. So not only has Joe Biden failed to really produce anything to improve the conditions of Black people in this country, or our political conditions, the Build Back Better plan failed. And I mean, it didn't go quite as far as I thought it should have, but it was still broadly popular and definitely would have been a big boost for him. Didn't do anything about student loan debt. The Democrats refused to do anything about racist voter suppression. And on top of all of that, as if all of that wasn't bad enough, $4 billion of our tax dollars every year is going to support Israel, on top of these billions of dollars that Biden is now trying to push through in this current onslaught against Palestine that Israel is carrying out. So instead of those resources going to just any number of very crucial things that would improve the conditions of Black people and improve the conditions of poor, working, and oppressed people in this country, our money, our resources is going to facilitate the death, destruction, and shedding of blood of another colonized people. And this is being given in our name, but without our consent. And so the Democrats seem to realize this to some extent. I was looking earlier. It seems like Biden and Kamala Harris, they rolled out something about they want to combat Islamophobia, which seems pretty like an obvious move to try to boost their numbers amongst Arab Americans. I don't know how much that's going to work. But the Biden administration and the Democrats understand very clearly that they have nothing to hang their hat on that would actually compel Black people to feel like they must invest a vote in Joe Biden. And if they don't do something real quick, it could get real spooky come November.
No, I think that's a very, very good point that you make, Sean. And, you know, Charles Blow, the New York Times columnist, actually had 2 columns now about this exact issue. The second one interviewing a lot of younger Black activists, a number of people who I know, but I mean, not just, you know, JeanPierre and Sean Blackmon, but, you know, NAACP officials, other people like that. I mean, you can see, but all younger, of the same age, same ilk, same cohort. And I mean, you know, you add to that, Sean, you know, the mendaciousness of Karine Jean-Pierre, the White House press secretary. I mean, you know, you've got her, of course, early on saying that calls for a ceasefire are repugnant. You've also got her comparing the pro-Palestine marches to the Nazis marching in Charlottesville in 2017. But obviously, as a Black woman of Haitian descent, you know, it's obvious that that's being deployed in a very particular way as well. At least it seems to me, Sean, I wonder your thoughts about this, to sort of try to break this continuity of Black Palestinian solidarity by creating this black face in a high place.
Absolutely. And, you know, Karine Jean-Pierre, bless her heart, she is just not very good at her job, Doug. I mean, she's basically supposed to be the top propagandist for the White House. And I just feel like we've definitely reached an interesting point in history where you don't even have to be good at lying for imperialism to get these top jobs. You just have to check certain boxes. And so Karine Jean-Pierre is in place the same reason that Lloyd Austin is the head of the Pentagon. We're supposed to feel proud that a Black man is the finger on the trigger of the U.S. war machine, or Linda Thomas Greenfield, the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. And I mean, the fact that Miss Jean-Pierre is Haitian right now, when the U.S. Is supporting yet another foreign invasion into Haiti with the de facto government of Dr. Ariel Henry that is only able to stand because of its support from the imperialist powers, I think to me makes it a little gross, a little even more gross. And so it's just so obvious that this is a transparent propaganda tactic, if you will, to show not only a black face, but a young black face that is also a woman saying these ridiculous things about Palestine in order to try to obscure the broader issue. But what we're really talking about is part and parcel of how the US and Israel are losing the narrative war. Public opinion is turning against what the US and Israel are doing in Palestine. And so trotting out a black face in high place, whether it's Corinne, JeanPierre, or anybody else, Kamala Harris, Bakari Sellers, or any of these other fools, it's just, it don't hit the same. It's not as potent as it used to be. And I really feel like this issue is radicalizing a lot of young people as they refuse to be cowed by this. I mean, right here in DC, at your alma mater, Eugene, Howard University, hundreds of students walked out just the other day. So it is just obvious that all these attempts by the US government and the pro-imperialist corporate-owned trust to try to sever these ties between black folks and Palestinians is failing miserably. And I think that bodes very well for the movement, and I think it bodes well for the effort to free Palestine.
HU, but connecting as well, Kwame Ture, also a Howard grad, one of the great voices against Zionism, of anyone, but certainly obviously coming out of SNCC and the Black Liberation Movement. Well, Sean Blackmon, as always, sir, it is an honor to have you here on the show. I'm sure that you will be present November 4th, this upcoming Saturday in Washington, D.C. at the large rally that will be happening for Palestine, continuing the legacy of Black Palestinian solidarity. So thank you, sir, for your time here on the Freedom Side.
Thank you both so much. It was a pleasure.